Hello. Um, I'm going to be referring to the recent tweet issue, the controversy from President Trump retweeting the Britain First videos. Now, I've already hopefully laid out my stance on that. I think it was wrong for Trump to share something without bothering to check the source material, and it's frankly in keeping with a president that in my opinion, lacks statesmanship almost completely. But I also said that there is the other side to it that certain left wing establishments like the BBC and others obsess over that, but they don't obsess in the same way over the issue of pan Islamism and the problem that we see of endemic persecution in Islamic countries. So I stand by all the things I said there. But there was something I think I only briefly touched on, and I think it deserves a bit more of a talking point. And that is that Donald Trump had made a personal tweet attacking Theresa May. I believe that came after she criticised him sharing these tweets. Well, you could argue that Trump was interfering in British politics because those tweets were from a fringe British nationalist group. Now, imagine if Theresa May, for the sake of argument, had shared a video being from some sort of, I don't know, Democratic focus group or some sort of anti Trump group, whatever the case may be, Trump would be in uproar and so would his supporters. So I think it is right that Theresa May and the British government felt somewhat miffed off by this. It wasn't an exactly diplomatic thing to do, whatever way you look at it. Defenders have said Trump just felt the need to talk about he feels the issue of Islamic extremism needs to be discussed. Absolutely. But there are ways to do it, and sharing the misleading videos from a neo nationalist group is not one of them. By misleading, I'm not saying that the material in the videos isn't disturbing. I'm saying that Britain First has a very long track record of distortion. This is a fact. In one of the most despicable recent acts, and this is why I don't support Britain First, they had this image showing lots of white women with horrible injuries, cuts and bruises on their face, and it said white victims of Muslim migrant violence. Very inflammatory, whatever way you look at it. It turned out that a lot of those women were actually victims of domestic violence. So this is a sort of distortion that Britain First does and doesn't bother amending. Um, and that is serious because that can directly lead to vigilantism. And I know that for a fact because I know of people personally who have been attacked by racist thugs in part because of the sort of propaganda that is put out there, or I should say, the sort of distortion that is put out there by Britain First. Basically, what I'm saying is, I think it is perfectly compatible to be concerned about Islamic extremism, to be against virtue signaling, to be against political correctness, and to say, yes, we need to talk about taboo subjects, but not pander to neo nationalist groups. And as the Breitbart spokesman himself said, what happens is when the mainstream don't talk about these things, then it goes into the hands of unsavory organisations. And I don't think that Britain First are victims. I think they are idiots, and I think that they are responsible for their own bad image. I have no sympathy with them. But anyway, to get to the point which I wanted to make in this video, I've made videos like this before, but it's been a while now and it's as topical as ever. I want to talk about the issue of American gun violence because President Trump attacked Theresa May for not fighting terrorism. Now, whether she's doing enough or not is a matter of debate. We have, of course, had at least 5 terrorist incidents this year, 4 of them Islamist, one targeted against Muslims. But it's been a dramatic year for terrorism, no question about it. Unless I'm mistaken, there's been more terrorist incidents in the UK this year than at any time since the Troubles in Northern Ireland. That is concerning, and it's something we should all um, definitely be taking view of as a major issue. We've also had problems with acid attacks in London, and we have ongoing problems with knife crime. So certainly this country has its problems. But for Trump to accuse Theresa May of that when he has done not a damn thing about gun violence is incredibly hypocritical. Now, I got the one of the latest editions of Time magazine, and if you look closely, it's sort of showing locations where there were well prominent mass shootings. It's fading out, ending in Las Vegas. This was published before the Texas shooting. So the last 2 years has been unbelievable in terms of the number of spree shootings there have been. Orlando, Texas, Las Vegas, um, all coming within a year. Now, in the same period, there's been one terrorist attack designated as such because it is politically motivated, whereas the other three attacks we're still not sure about. Actually, I should say Orlando was actually a terrorist attack, but it's also classed as a spree shooting. Now, briefly about the whole issue of terrorism versus spree shooting. Some try to politicize this and say, oh, if he was white, people would say it was just a deranged guy with a gun. Well, Timothy McVeigh was white and he was classed as a terrorist, right? So let's stop this identity politics nonsense when we're talking about terrorism. The definition of terrorism is an act of violence with a political motivation. Now, with spree shootings, we still don't know why Stephen Paddock done what he done. Um, so, in terms of the motivations, it is up in the air. But what is clear is that America has a problem. If you look at this chart, this is going from 1982 onwards. And I appreciate it might not be very clear on the screen, but basically, the black lines represent those injured, the red, those killed in spree shooting incidents. Now, that is sobering. Clearly, the situation is getting worse. Now, you could argue America's population is getting bigger, but I'm not sure if there is a correlation there. I don't think that necessarily works out. Because if we take population into consideration, I've had this debate before. People say, oh, well, of course, America has more mass shootings than Britain because we have 6 times the population. But if that was the case, proportionally, it still doesn't work out. We have fewer than 100 gun murders per year. The United States has, depending on your criteria, if you're talking about all gun deaths, it's up to 30,000. If you're talking about gun murders, at least 15,000. But whatever way you look at it, the United States has far more gun homicides than pretty much any other developed democracy. There are some countries which have a worse problem, arguably Brazil and parts of Central America are worse. But for a country that prides itself on being the greatest country in the world, America has a long way to go when it comes to basic security, frankly. Um, I mean, it was said after Sandy Hook that if the murder of children in a school, if the mass murder of children in a school isn't going to change opinions, then nothing will. And sadly, that's probably true. I posted something to this effect on my Facebook page today about Trump's comment. Um, and an American guy I know, I like the guy, I know him, but he is like a lot of, Second Amendment Americans. It's like immediately thinking of the gun, and that's it. And it was like, if gun violence isn't going to end, and if someone comes to my house, they'll get 2 shots in their head or whatever. He's actually, believe it or not, a nice guy. He's not like a gun fanatic, at least I've never seen him that way. But the point is, a lot of Americans do have this mentality. I'm not talking about everyone. The Time magazine, you could argue, has a liberal bias. And the chances are, frankly, the sort of people who read this are going to be cosmopolitan, they're going to be city dwellers, they're not going to be in small town America. And that's a generalization, but you could argue this is preaching to the converted. From a European perspective, this isn't even a left wing, right wing issue, because in Europe, and not just in Europe, in Australia, in Japan, it's even a case that many conservatives are for gun regulation. And it's this hysteria that as soon as gun control is mentioned, it's, oh, they're coming to take our guns. That's something that I've never understood. And that it's a culture that I don't think I'll ever understand. That when you have such a profound problem and people, it's always the same situation. There's a mass shooting, there's condemnation, there's vigils, then the likes of Trump and Pence will say now is not a time to talk about gun regulation. So the question is, when is a time? When is a time? As for Donald Trump, his own record on this is very ambiguous. because he's flip flopped. There's been times he's actually been in favour of gun regulation. Ever since his 2016 campaign, it seems to me he has been absolutely pandering to the gun lobby. Um, and that's a disgrace. That the needs of the NRA seem to matter more than the lives of American children. I mean, this is crazy. I I want to make a few things clear here. Number one, I'm not against guns, period. I am not against the right for people to defend their homes. I understand that America is a huge country and there's parts of America that are quite remote. People need guns for things like hunting, for protecting their livestock in the case of farmers, and yes, for protecting their families. I totally understand that. So I'm not one of these people that say ban all guns. I don't think that would work anyway. But I do get very frustrated with the mentality of the gun lobby that it's any mention of gun control is automatically that somehow offends them in a way that it's something I'll never understand, and it is an almost uniquely American mindset. You don't get this necessarily from conservatives in other countries. This seems to be a uniquely right wing American mindset, and it's something I'll never quite understand. I understand that guns are a big part of American culture, but the fact that you can have so many spree shootings and it's the same mentality every time. Oh, this is terrible, but let's change nothing. Someone pointed out, I can't remember who, but if you had a virus and the American government was be seen to be doing nothing about it, there would be an outcry. Well, why is this different? This is a national health emergency when you have so many people being killed and injured. And that isn't just including spree shootings, that is including deaths from people who really shouldn't have guns. Now, this is interesting. The magazine has done this poll, or they've taken some statistics, and it shows the opinions of gun owners versus non-gun owners. And in some areas, there's actually, in fact, in pretty much every area, even gun owners, more than half of them, agree with some sort of legislation. So bear with me here. In favour of preventing people with mental illnesses from purchasing guns. 89%, 89%. In other words, the vast majority of Americans, whether they own guns or not, feel that people who have a history of mental illness shouldn't have firearms. It's not rocket science. Requiring background checks for private sales and at gun shows. 87% of non gun owners, 77% of gun owners. Again, the majority of gun owners support that. Barring gun purchases by people on no flyer watch lists. 84%, 82%. Creating a federal government database to track all gun sales. Bit more of a discrepancy here. 80% for those who are not gun owners, 54% to those who are. I suppose they would argue we don't want to be watched by the government. Um, Banning assault style weapons. 77% of non gun owners, 48% of gun owners, and I'm disappointed by that because no private civilian needs an assault style weapon. Banning high capacity magazines that hold more than 10 rounds of ammunition. 74% of non gun owners, 44% of gun owners. Again, I'm somewhat disappointed. I don't know why any private citizen needs to stockpile military style guns. What is interesting though is you get so called super savers, people, or there's a word for it actually. Can't find it. But here's some more statistics. Americans who say the right to own guns is essential to their personal freedom. 74% of gun owners, 35% of non gun owners. Now, that says to me that gun owners, with the greatest respect, have a siege mentality. This idea that if you don't have a firearm, then you're going to lose your freedom. That to me is crazy. And it's something I'll never understand. I don't have a firearm. I'm free. I can speak my mind. Gun laws should be more strict than they are today. 62% of non gun owners, only 29% of gun owners. Further restrictions on legal gun sales would result in fewer mass shootings. 56% of non gun owners, only 29% of gun owners. So, in some areas, there are discrepancies, but in other areas, clearly, gun owners do have common sense. They can see that someone with mental health problems, for example, shouldn't have firearms. And I will never understand why, I mean, for example, that mentality, oh, if I don't have my gun, I'm going to lose my freedom. Well, prove that you're truly free and, try living without a gun. If you're truly free, then you won't need a gun. To me, that's a siege mentality. Like, I need this for protection. I can understand if you live in a rough neighborhood and you fear for yourself or your family. But anyone, as far as I'm concerned, that feels the need to bring open carry into a Starbucks needs their head examined. That to me is madness. Now, people will say, you're British, mind your own business. Okay, I'm not telling Americans what to do, but very often, frankly, American gun owners do stick their nose and pontificate about other countries, and they will make these absurd analogies like, oh, Hitler banned guns and look what happens. So, for example, they make this analogy that gun control is what dictators do, but that doesn't mean anything. Dictators also ban free speech. Dictators ban a lot of things. That doesn't prove a damn thing. Because Britain is a democracy, Japan is a democracy, Australia is a democracy. All free countries have tough gun regulation. We also have extremely few numbers of mass shootings. So I don't accept this argument that if you take away the guns, then you lose the freedom. But the guns aren't going to be banned anyway. 8 years of the Obama presidency, every single time there was a mass shooting, it was like, stockpile, Obama will take away your guns. It never happened. So I believe there is a great deal of paranoia and siege mentality from gun owners. And you also see these super stockpilers they'll build up massive supplies because they think the government's out to get them. I mean, really, survival is sort of, quite frankly, in my opinion, nut jobs. Um, Say what you will about that, but that's how I see it. And I think there are people who need to be seriously watched. I mean, we don't know all the details about Stephen Paddock yet. There's a lot coming through. And in the case of the Texas church shooting, it sounds like that guy had a lot of personal grievances against those in the congregation, which, by the way, makes it different from terrorism. In terrorist attacks, terrorists generally kill strangers. Mass shooters often know their victims. I'm not saying that's always the case. It wasn't the case in Las Vegas, but quite often it tends to be workplace disputes, family disputes. And the difference is in other countries, there might be a fist fight, there might be, an estranged family. In America, it ends up in a mass shooting. So all I'm saying is that, frankly, I feel that there are a lot of American gun advocates who just have their head buried in the sand. They will not accept that there is a problem going on here. Yes, Europe might have a problem with Islamist terror, and yes, you could argue that European establishments need to be more honest about this. I've always argued that. But I will, sit by when the American president's saying about my country, will do more about terrorism. I'm thinking, well, you do more about gun violence in America. You're not doing a damn thing. All you want to do is pander to the gun lobby. So I accept that you're not going to have a situation where gun violence will totally end. I think that's impossible. But there cannot be a situation where you have these mass shootings and it's seen as just a fact of life, as President Obama pointed out. This is not normal, and I don't understand why Americans are okay, or I should say, gun supporting Americans are okay with mass shootings, but they get into an uproar about terrorism. And it isn't, you could argue it's psychological because of 9/11, but there were mass shootings before 9/11, and it was the same mentality of not caring. Um, there is a lot more focus on, I mean, the response, for example, to the New York attack, the Islamist vehicle attack, was a lot more pronounced than the response to the mass shootings. Yet far more Americans die from mass shootings than in terrorist incidents. That's just a fact. Now, you could argue that more Europeans die from terrorism than in mass shootings, but both sides need to take these problems seriously. We need to do more to address the fact of pan Islamism. But I'm not going to stand by and listen to lectures from American gun zealots about safety. If guns made a country safe, America would be one of the safest countries in the world. It's not. So it's time to stop denying this, and it's time to just accept that there is a problem. You don't have to agree with everything I'm saying, but all I'm saying is please just accept that there is a problem. Stop living in denial. How many shootings is it going to take? And about a final word about the gun lobby, they always talk about their rights and the right to bear arms, but they have no problem shouting down anyone who disagrees. They have no problem threatening gun regulation advocates. And there's always these veiled threats like, you know, come and take my gun and you'll get 2 bullets in your head, this sort of thing. There is a real, it's almost like a cult-like mentality, and I don't think I'll ever understand it. There's many things I like about the United States. The gun culture is not one of them. I am not against guns. Hell, I might even be a gun owner, but I would like to think I was a sensible gun owner who recognized that something needed to be done. And to be fair, there are devil-headed gun owners who do realize that this is not normal. That's how I feel about it. So I know I've thrown a lot into this video. Sorry for that. I didn't mean it to be so long. But, Trump is being a hypocrite with this. He is accusing Theresa May of not doing anything but terrorism. He's not doing a damn thing about the gun issue, except pandering to the NRA.